So 2 weeks ago, I was made redundant from a startup here in Auckland, New Zealand that I'd worked at for the past 7 years. Four of those were part time when I used to live in Melbourne, and then the last little over 3 years was full time. And so I moved from Melbourne to Auckland to do this job because I really loved and love the team. And now it's all come to an end due to redundancy, which is something I've never been through before. And I don't have any family in New Zealand. I just have my partner and friends. But because it's something I've never been through before, like I've realized that whenever a bushfire goes through your life and just flattens everything, it's just nature, but it still really hurts. And there are also some kind of principles that you can apply and things you can do whenever this kind of thing happens. And it turns out I'm not the first person in the history of startups to be made redundant. So that's the good news. There are many people who have been through this before. And yeah, what I did when this happened just a couple of weeks ago was, because I didn't know what to do, I just started asking for help from people I trust, from family, friends, and also the most successful people that I knew, or the most successful people whose email I could find online, um, and who I thought whose opinions I might be interested in getting. And so that's what I did. I reached out to like a bunch of New Zealand's most successful CEOs and successful people that I know or don't know, and asked them for advice. And incredibly, when you ask people for advice, people often help. And so it's been incredibly humbling. And rather than just hoard all of these learnings to myself, I wanted to share what I've learned from talking to all of these people, and also what I'm going through myself over this time, because I'm definitely learning as I go. And hopefully some of you find this useful, and if you'd like a copy of the exact emails that some of these CEOs sent back to me, then I'd be happy to share that in a PDF. Just send me an email, deanwatson90@gmail.com, and be happy to share that with you. So the first thing that I've learned so far about what's helpful to do when you are made redundant is to take time for yourself. And this is a piece of advice that came out across everybody that I spoke to. Take time for yourself and don't rush into the next thing. And it may not seem like that important a thing to do or that urgent a thing to do, but I think it's both important and urgent to take some time for yourself. And so the other week, I just went for a drive just to a really nice beach. I just went to Takapuna Beach and just sat down on a bench there with the other pensioners who were kind of wandering around at a time of the day when everyone else is meant to be at work or is at work. And I just stared out at the ocean for a while. And I find nature to be quite healing in that way. So whatever that looks like for you, take some time for yourself. It's not something that's gonna, fix itself very quickly. So you just need to be kind to yourself during that time. And so that's like a mantra I've been repeating to myself. So take some time for yourself. And it's okay also if you have a good cry as well, and it'll come out at unexpected times. And that's okay too. Be really grateful for those moments as well, because that's part of the healing process, I think, whenever you go through something a bit traumatic. Second thing that you can do if you're made redundant and you've been working at a startup or any other company is, ask the people closest to you and the most successful people you know for advice. So it's important to ask the people closest to you, friends, family. Some of those people might be, successful in your eyes. Some of them may not be, but that's okay. If they've been, most people, will have been through a version of this, whether it's a relationship breakup or whether it's, something in their life coming to an end or a redundancy or being fired or whatever it might be. And just hearing from other people who've been through this kind of thing and have gotten through the other side and how they did it can be incredibly comforting. So, yeah, speaking to people, very, very important. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to hear from people who are really successful. How did they get through this kind of stuff if it's happened to them or if they have seen it happen to other people? And yeah, what worked for others and what didn't work. And so I just would look up people online that run companies I really admire, even people I don't know. And the great thing about being in New Zealand is it's not that hard to get people's emails often. And people actually responded to these questions. And I just asked 2 questions in these emails I sent these very busy people. The first question was, what have you noticed has worked well for you, your friends or colleagues who've been through this sort of thing? And the second question that I asked was, how did the people that handled it best respond differently to the people who didn't respond as well? And from there, I kind of, got some actual things I could do while responding to being made redundant that I could kind of use as guiding lights on what to do. Because, when a bushfire goes through your life and flattens everything, you're normally not in a great headspace, a great emotional place to figure that out for yourself. So I wanted to just cut to the chase and learn from the very best. How do you handle stuff like that? So, ask people closest to you and the most successful people you know or whose emails you can get for advice, and then just listen. Be open to whatever comes your way. The third thing that you can do is think about who you are and what you want. And that sounds very wishy-washy, but actually it's the foundation upon which everything great that comes next can be built. Because if you don't know sort of what your mission is in life, what your values are, and what you want in, say, the next thing you do, then how are you ever going to find it? Even if the perfect thing comes along, you'll miss it because you haven't spent the time thinking about what the perfect thing kind of looks like to you. I know there's no perfect thing, but you get the idea. So it's important to ask this whenever, I'm using the metaphor of a bushfire because I'm Australian, so you're just going to have to deal with that. The reason that I think it's really helpful to check in with who you are and what you want often, but especially when something like this happens, is that it may have changed since the last time you asked yourself. If you work in a startup, you're probably someone who, is either is high performance or really wants to be, and so therefore you do hard things. You're willing to do hard things, and that means change. And so you're probably no stranger to changes. And so, it's also in your personal life that applies too. You will be a little different to how you were the last time you were looking for a job or, that sort of thing. And another reason to do this as well is it's really tempting just to go onto the job websites and just see all these companies who, really want you and just try and fit into their idea of who you should be. But a far more powerful place to start from, and something that's far more likely, I believe, to lead to an incredibly fulfilling job like the one I've done for the last 7 years, is to think about who you are and what you want first, and then go and look for the companies out there or the job openings that kind of, tick those boxes of what's most important to you. And so I've been asking myself questions like, what do I want in my next job? and then I'll just make like a bullet point list. That was the first thing I did. And since I did that, that's been refined a bit more into kind of three things. And this is just for me as an example. The people is the most important thing at the next thing I do or the next place I work. There needs to be like a give and take relationship. I'm quite a giving person, so it's great if it comes back, and vice versa. It's like I want a relationship that lasts for the long term, and so yeah, I'm kind of not just kind of in it for like quick kicks and that kind of thing. So it needs to be a relationship where there's give and take from both sides, and we can work together to build a great relationship over the years. So that's the most important thing for me. The next most important thing is that I just really love to see that what I'm doing is having an impact in some way. So when I first joined the previous startup I worked for, I initially just started posting jokes to the company's Facebook page because my background is a comedy writer. I used to write for the TV show 7 Days. And I immediately saw that the posts that I was putting up were engaging the people who would like the page, and then the number of likes on the page was great. This is back in 2015, back when Facebook was a big thing. So that might explain the engagement. A bit harder these days to get engagement on Facebook. But just seeing that impact immediately was incredibly satisfying and just motivated me to really kind of keep going and keep trying. So seeing an impact is really important. And then the third thing that I've figured out is really important to me is feeling ownership over how I do the work. And that kind of goes back to trust. And I know that's not there often right from the outset. You have to earn trust. But yeah, feeling ownership over how I do the work. I think that goes back to maybe being self-employed in the past, in that I really, it's really important to me to take ownership of the things that I'm doing, because it's more fun when you take responsibility for things in your life rather than just, hoping that someone else will save the day. The last thing I'll say about thinking about who you are and what you want is have a think about what your personal mission statement could be, what your values are, and maybe what your process could be for making that, sort of living that. So at the company I used to work at, the person who ran the company sort of helped me figure out my personal mission just through lots of conversations. And what I realized is my personal mission is to help people be the best version of themselves. And then from there, I thought about what are my values? And I sort of came up with 4 values, which are currently, and these can change a little bit because they're still kind of, I don't know, newish, but these are the things that are most important to me is home sweet home, which is, feeling safe and comfortable in the place that I live and work, and taking ownership of creating this in partnership with anyone I share a living or working space with. Being where I am is the next value. So that's being engaged and present in what I'm doing and focusing on what I can control. The third value is evolving my identity. So if something no longer serves me, let it go. And if a new identity kind of perks my interest, investigate through little experiments. And if something is already working, how can I maximize that? And then the fourth value is always be asking. So I really believe in asking for what you want, but then letting go of receiving, because receiving the thing you've asked for is out of your control, so there's no point getting worked up about that. The final bit of that is, the way I'm describing it at the moment is a process of how to realize your mission and live your values. And so for some reason in my life, I've just been someone who has tended to create communities of people. And I think it's because I never felt like I fit in anywhere when I was younger. And so the only way to fit in was to create the kind of place to fit in that would work for me. And so my first version of what this kind of process looks like is kind of harnessing the collective wisdom of community to share the knowledge of the world, so that it's easier for people to be the best versions of themselves. So I know that's a bit waffly, but that's where I'm at the moment. I'm working on it. Yeah, so yeah, think about who you are and what you want. There's nothing to lose from doing that. It's like going to therapy for 10 hours a day. So it's pretty, I'm finding it quite tough and draining, but I know it will be worth it, because I've been through versions of this before at other points in my life where bushfires have come through. The next thing to do, if you've been made redundant, is to kiss a lot of frogs. And this is a piece of advice I got from someone who runs a venture capital fund. So someone from the investor perspective, but I just found it immediately resonated with me. It's nothing like a good metaphor. So by kiss a lot of frogs, what this person meant was talk to as many businesses as possible and apply for some stuff just to see how it feels like. So some of the things I've been doing, even before I kind of felt I was ready, was going on to Seek and Indeed and LinkedIn, and for startups specifically, Blackbird, Icehouse Ventures and StartMate, and just seeing what startup jobs are on there, seeing what corporate jobs are on there, seeing what's on there, especially the jobs that relate to what I think I might want to do next. So by doing that, you start to you can start to test what you think you might want to do next, and you start to get more familiar with what job postings look like in this day and age. So I found that really helpful, even before I felt I was ready to sort of dive in and start looking at openings and companies. Just doing that, and just applied for a few things, just for fun. It's a good excuse to update your CV as well. So I'd highly recommend doing that. And one other thing to do with kissing a lot of frogs is something I've done the last couple of days is I've read the mission statements of literally hundreds of Kiwi startups and just noticing which ones resonate with me, if any. It's okay if they don't. It may just mean I'm not clear enough on what I want yet. But whenever something has resonated with me, just kind of noticing how it makes me feel, even if I can't explain it at first. For example, the other day I was looking, there's this great site called Matchstick. I think it's matchstick.com. And it's a collection, it's just like a collection of all these New Zealand startups, and you can read their mission statements on there. And I came across this company called Sea Change that wants to essentially create ferries that work the same way that the America's Cup boats work. So I think it's like a hydrofoil kind of situation where the ferry would kind of float above the water, and it'd be hydro-powered or all electric and all that kind of thing. And for some reason, I just looked at the website and burst out laughing because it's such an outrageous vision. And I happen to just love ferries, which is, I know, a bit weird, but I just love ferries, and I do love the ocean. I'm not an engineer. I know nothing about how to build a ferry or anything like that. I just love ferries. And my partner is someone who, when I've roped her into going on ferries, ends up a little seasick. So part of the beauty of this ferry they're trying to make is that it'll reduce seasickness. And so I'm like, oh, great. That means my partner and I might be able to go on more ferries. So I didn't have on my list go work for a ferry company or a ferry startup, but for some reason that resonated. And so then I just reached out to someone who worked there and had a coffee with them the other day, and just had a fantastic conversation with them. I don't know if it'll lead anywhere, but the point is that just start looking at what's out there so you can start to really refine what you want. So it all goes back to what you want. So that's the base that'll make all your dreams come true, hopefully. yeah, so yeah, keep updating what you want. The next thing that you can do to respond to being made redundant is to meet people in person. So, like I just mentioned, I met up with that person at this company I just kind of responded to on a gut level the other day, and it was great, even though a job didn't come from it. That's kind of not the point. The point is to make a connection with somebody else who's got the courage to work in startups and the courage to try and make an outrageous vision come true. Doing this will really energize you. I come away from these conversations just like, I'm like, oh, everything's okay. And there's other people out there who are, on this ride with me as well. And it's so nice to know after 7 years at the one company that there's a whole big, beautiful community of people out there especially in the New Zealand startup community that are also, riding the bumpy waves with with myself. So I found that very comforting so far, and it just energizes me and just gives me a reminder. Oh, just keep going. It's okay. You will find your place eventually. Um, Another thing you can do by meeting people in person is just go to events. Like go onto some of the startup websites like Blackbird or Icehouse Ventures or StartMate, and they've got events listed on there. And the people, so far, my very limited experience of going to these events, they end up being full of a lot of really, really smart people of, across, many different ages. And it's very inspiring to talk to people who are doing very cool things, because anybody who chooses to work in a startup has quite a bit of courage, I think. So, it's really cool to be around other people that you admire before you've even gotten to know them. So I've really enjoyed that, the couple of things I've been to so far. And also like talking to people, the place that I used to work at, what I've done is I've scheduled some just recurring meetings, like once every 2 weeks in the Google Calendar. I've just got started recurring meetings with people that I really loved, being around at the place I used to work, and who are also happy to take the time to catch up with me regularly, even though we no longer work together. And so I can continue learning from them, and we can continue learning from each other. So that's another thing that's great. And on that theme of communication, if you're lucky enough to have a great partner like I do, then talking to them about what you've done each day, even if you get to the end of the day and you feel like you've been in a washing machine, which is the experience for me pretty much every day since this has happened over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, just verbalizing it, is so helpful. You often learn a lot of things, and so I'll talk to my partner at the end of the day, and then I'll end up with like a page of notes like this from the conversation, just about stuff I've learned or realized. So talking to people is just so simple, but goodness me, I've just got so much out of it. So that's a great thing to do instead of isolating yourself. We've had enough isolation, I think, for this generation. So let's connect. The sixth thing that you can do if you've been made redundant is consider pivoting into something new rather than looking to do exactly the same thing as before, because the job market, you're in, all businesses in that area you used to be in may be struggling as well. So I used to be in, the company I worked at was in ed tech, education, and so I could go and work for another education company. I'm definitely open to that, but it's probably a good idea to not just limit myself to that, because other education companies may also be struggling in this market. By the way, from what I have heard so far, it definitely sounds like most startups are struggling a bit in this market at the moment, especially those that rely on outside investment, because all the investors have seen their net worths go down, and so they were going to invest in companies, but who were taking having these big moonshots, but have now decided that it's looking a bit risky, and so we're only going to invest in companies that are like making a profit. And that's totally understandable as well. So that's yeah, I thought that was a really good piece of advice. So the list that, by the way, the list that I've made for myself so far, the areas that I might like to go into so far is education, because I really enjoyed doing that. I didn't start writing jokes on the Facebook page of this company I used to work for thinking, oh, I love education, all that stuff. But over the years, I've really come to care about the mission of, yeah, just kind of helping the education system be better, help more people. So that's definitely an area that I want to go into again. Personal finance is another area that I'm really interested in. Ever since my grandpa gave me a copy of The Barefoot Investor 5 years ago, I've just loved learning more about personal finance, and I have a life goal to become financially independent now. And I love talking to other people about money and what they do with it. And yeah, I'm definitely have read all of the stuff about the financial independence movement and find it endlessly fascinating. So that's something I'd like to work in, but not as an investment banker, at least not at the moment. I'm more interested in helping people with everyday people with personal finance, helping people just, do better with money, so they can have a great life. Another area is helping people under 25 with something. I don't know exactly what that could be, but I've really enjoyed working with younger people, especially those kind of under 25 who can really have a big impact on. So that's another area. And yeah, another area would be like personal development. I guess that's part of the reason I'm making this video, in the hope that it will help other people. But I really love helping other people just realize their full potential and be the best version of themselves. So personal development is another area that I'm really interested in. And then finally, I realized over the years that whenever I recommend things to people, they tend to take action or pay attention. And then I realized recommending things is just another word for sales. So even though I've never done it before, sales is something that I'm open to trying. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. But they're the areas that I've been thinking about maybe going into next. Oh, and I guess we can add ferries to that list now as well, apparently. So yeah, another way to think about the idea of pivoting into something new is whether you'll work for a startup, whether you'll work in corporate, or whether you might try and start your own thing or be self-employed. So those three categories as well is something I've been thinking about. I think I want to work in another startup because I like that a lot. But I've never, and I've done the self-employed thing. I used to be a comedy writer, so I did that for 10 years. And then I was a golfer before that. So I've tried a few different things. I've never tried corporate before, so I'm more open to that than I thought I would be. But I think probably my heart and soul probably belongs in the more wild ride of trying to change the world, and startups seem to be the best vehicle for that at the moment. So anyway, that's how I'm thinking of that. The seventh thing that you can do to to kind of respond after being made redundant is finally to consider doing some casual work while you decide on your next move. So if you're not in the financial situation to take as much time as you need, or take a long period of time to work out what to do next, take the pressure off yourself. There's no shame in that. Just go wash some dishes somewhere. If you work in startups, you'll be used to just taking on whatever it takes to get the job done. And this is another one of those, as Ray Dalio would say. Just do whatever it takes to give yourself the time to figure out what matters to you and what you might want to do next. And if that means going to washing some bloody dishes, go and do that. I went for a job interview at a hotel the other week for a job as a porter, which is the person at the front who greets all the guests as they come into the hotel. Haven't heard back, but still, it was good practice to just give myself permission to go and get something else to do in the meantime. So yeah, and I know a friend who started a successful business in the ed tech space who, when he left the company he'd started, just like took 6 months to like do some landscaping work as he figured out his next move. So it's a really, really good thing to do to, put yourself to use and yeah, give yourself some time and space and money just to think about what you're going to do next, because it's really worth taking the time. From all the advice I've heard from all these CEOs and from all my friends and successful people I've spoken to, if you can take the time, do it. It's really worth it. So yeah, they're kind of the 7 sort of tips, plus a few other ones that I've picked up from talking to all these people and just kind of ripping my soul open and looking within about what to do in this kind of situation and what I might want to do next. I really hope that helps. And again, if you'd like a copy of these, the actual responses that some of these people, so generously shared with me, be happy to send it to you directly. Just send me an email to deanwatson90@gmail.com. And yeah, good luck with your search for your next thing, and have courage. From something I've heard a lot of is that if you choose to work in startups, anywhere in the world, but New Zealand as well, it's going to be bumpy, and yeah, it does get better, and other things will come along. So yeah, keep up the good fight, and hang in there, and hug lots of people, and go chat to lots of cool people. You'll feel better. So good luck.